density gas, meaning that a conscious gas force.
Now, Faith, what's your take on mind? Do you know what is the correlation of mind and gas to you?
Um, Mind and gas.
Yeah, that's what we.
No,
Yeah,
I said conscious gas, not just gas.
Well, anybody that say, "Hey, I love you," anybody that say stuff like me, you gonna have to display what you mean. What do you mean by conscious gas? Meaning gas that is able to function of its own will, or what do you mean by
Mm-hmm.
conscious gas?
Yeah. It's basically sentient, meaning that it does basically it has a collective conscience of doing what it's set to do when it during its time of creation or origin. Basically it's
So,
independent.
and which gas would that be?
So I told them that spirit beings are conscious gas forces, meaning that they are reasoning energy in one degree of another, right? So which means that spirit, everybody has a spirit, which means that they have they have a separate mind than somebody else, right? Meaning that your spirit is your mindset, which
Right. So,
is so
okay,
so if your spirit is if your spirit is a conscious gas,
I guess so.
right? Because spirits is the gas force, but they're conscious because they are programmers and controllers. They are independent, but they're connected to the collective consciousness, but they have their own way of doing things as far as separately. They may not agree with other spirits. All spirits don't agree with each other. So what gives them their individual personality? Their own mind, which is why humans have their own mind. Now we can choose to become a unit by agreeing to the same things. Then that creates a collective mind. But your mind is separate until you bring them together with somebody else, which is your personal spirit being.
all right. So, when you're talking about spirit beings being gaseous, what do you mean by that?
So I said conscious gases, meaning that if all things are produced from non-ether and non-ether is a gas force, right? Conscious gas force is sentient, then because all spirit beings are ether gas.
Okay, I got a question for you. When you talk about non-ether, where's that coming from?
Right. So when people
No,
talk
meaning
about non-ether,
like where could I find more information on the gas aspect of non-ether?
um for me, I looked into what's this book? It's by Malachi. So what is this book? It's The Nature of Nature, 1 through 3.
Hmm. Hmm. So this is that the basis of what you're explaining, or is that one element of it? Meaning, are you explaining it from that book as far as the mind and gas and conscious gas, or are you
So
developing?
yeah, but I'm also explaining it from understanding other background information because I read. The thing is this, I read a lot of stuff, but people don't think so. Like Heavy said, they think I was only American Indian man, but I read a lot of things. I believe that I can learn from everybody. Meaning, you know what I'm saying? So I learn from everybody. But what I do is that I take that and I reason out what makes actual sense. And if non-ether is a conscious gas force that everything is produced by, for instance, like I said, the sun, if the sun is producing ether and ether is a gas, then that means that and then water is hydrogen, and if hydrogen is a gas as well, so that means that we are inhaling and exhaling gases. And this is how
And that's
we are able to.
and that's what you're saying. The mind is.
Right. So I say the mind is your personal spirit, meaning that you have a brain which is already connected to the collective consciousness, but your individual personality comes from your mind, meaning that, oh, if I, for instance, we all might react to disrespect in a whole different way. Why? Because we see it different. What makes us see it different than but if what would make me see something different than how you see it, Phase?
Brain functionality.
But what is that predicated on?
It's predicated on which parts of the brain are functioning in which way in you. Like, for instance, you ever heard of somebody suffering damage to their frontal lobe?
Yeah, and then they
And then
tweaking.
after they
Yeah.
suffer that damage, they're no longer able to decipher certain emotions or reason certain things or come to certain conclusions they would have been able to come to before they suffered that injury. Meaning, if something happens to the that same thing that we're saying is the mind is also affected. So ultimately, what you're dealing with is the brain and the system that's hooked up to that brain, which would be either you're looking at it as a central nervous system, your peripheral nervous system, how they function with each other, the DNA that makes that up, because you have your neurons, you got your glial cells that operate within the nervous system. They contain nuclei, and those nuclei have inside of them DNA. So DNA will be the blueprint of the brain at that point and the whole system thereof, the nervous system, which means that which we call in the mind, all you have really to access for, in this realm is your brain and its system. You don't really know what the mind is, because if I take a piece of your brain out, you're no longer that same mind being. The mind, if it were what you're saying, wouldn't be able to be altered by something happening on the realm of physicality. Somebody gets punched in the head, they should still be the same spiritual guru that they were the day before.
Not
You understand? But
necessarily though, but wait, that's why I told them earlier that the brain and the mind is not the same thing. Didn't I say that, Heavy?
well, that's why I challenge you. If you're okay with that,
No,
because if
yeah.
you're saying that it isn't, if I like not necessarily because it piques my interest. Okay, well, explain more. Because if you can explain the inner workings of the brain, of the mind, scientifically, and how it can stand on its own, you got my attention. If you cannot explain the inner workings of the mind and how it can stand on its own without implicating the brain and its activity, then what seems to be happening is you have the metaphysical side of it and you have
Mm-hmm.
the physical side of it.
Mm-hmm.
One, we actually can do something with. Metaphysics, you really can't do anything with. Even
Right.
when you're trying to describe metaphysics, when you go into non-ether and you start listing the gases or the noble gases that come together to make what that force is, you're still having a result to going to chemistry to explain something that's supposed to be spiritual. Then why add spiritual? Why not just deal with it as what it is? That science at that point in time will be chemistry and the chemical makeup. Or then you can go into the physics, that which allows for these things to move and express how they move and express. You get
Right.
what I'm
So
saying? It's
when
the same thing that happened with carbon. If you get what I'm saying, why a lot of people say, "Oh, we're carbonated beings." It's just a limited degree of information at that point, because they wouldn't be aware, whoever would be expressing that carbon is in all living things. As far as you know, on this planet, is the base foundation of chemical makeup in this realm. And it has many reasons why carbon is able to do that, because of all of its abilities to fluctuate and work with and form different bonds with different compounds. Do you get what I'm explaining? So that means different life forms are able to spawn from carbon as it moves around, forming different connections with different beings, six neutrons, six protons, six electrons, balancing itself out to work with other elementary particles to form other life forms. That's the life you have here. If you were on another planet, maybe you could argue silicon or something else. But right here on planet Earth, carbon. And that's the basis of all life. So who would be walking around saying melanin dominant people are carbonated beings and Caucasoids are not? Those who don't know science. Anybody who understood spirituality and metaphysics, they can say that all day. Scientists aren't bothered by them. They don't affect medicine. They don't affect what's happening with the cell phone developments and all this other stuff that they use these same type of sciences for. So my point is, if we're describing the brain and its functions, which allow for us to be who and what we are, you can go into what happens when somebody's brain is affected, and you can realize we can't just be dealing with some esoteric mind concept, because if we were, then it would be unchanged. You
And
understand? If something
so,
happened to the physical being.
so
Go
Faith,
ahead.
let me ask you this: what is the connection between heart and mind?
Brain heart coherence. What is the connection?
Right.
What do you mean by what is the connection to it?
Like what?
Well, first we
Yeah, what literally is the thing that's bringing this connection into play? Like what is the correlation of and how does mind function with heart? You know?
Okay,
and,
so we
and
got
not just
two.
from
We
a
got two.
biochemical level,
Hmm.
but do you believe that it
Hmm.
exists on something other than a biochemical?
I mean, it could. They got different fields of science that they're developing to answer questions like that. Where you the Q word would be quantum, or you go quantum biology, you can go quantum chemistry, you go quantum physics, right? Of course, you're dealing with two main sciences when you're asking that question, as it pertains to the brain and the heart. One dealing with cellular development, and the other one dealing with neural development. Each of those tie into one key thing, and that is DNA. You understand what I'm explaining? So, heavy, you can really only truly think to the things allow you to think.
Exactly. Okay,
I'm still
so
here.
you basically proving my point because I told them earlier. I said the brain and the mind is not the same thing. Meaning this, I get what you're saying. Like because if you alter the okay, for instance, if I break my leg, my spirit is not going to just stop it from breaking. You get what I'm saying? Like if I injure myself, my body is injured. Like affecting my actual body alters the way my body will work because I'm damaging DNA. Cool, but my point is this: that's a given, meaning that that's a natural order set in place by nature. Period. It's gonna always happen, right? But the way I choose to go about my healing process, or the what I choose to go about it. For instance, if I myself and I choose to go through physical therapy, surgery, that's a mind thing. That's me personal reasoning to decide what path I want to go down. Now, that's why I say like do stuff that they don't normally do. They be like, "Oh, I couldn't help it because it was your brain working against you." That's why I told them that the mind is to help tame the brain, meaning that your brain is limited, so it don't have the same nature as the mind.
Here's the problem here.
Mm-hmm.
You have four entities that get confused here: heart, mind, spirit, and I think they're getting confused because everybody sees them as something to do with how we think and how we feel. So, but they all are used. I don't think we could go because the problem is, let's say he says it's this, then he goes for an hour and reels on why it's that, and he goes for an hour. So, how is it used by the majority of the people that use it, or how is it used colloquially, or how is it used classically? You know, because if not, then you're just saying this kind of like when niggas be like, "This my truth, this your truth." Like, what are you defining it within which confines of what? Because before he
Mm-hmm.
came on here, I clearly heard, and you could take it back, but I clearly heard you say the mind is a product of the hydrogen atom. And that's what I think Heavy was
No,
asking
that ain't
Phase if
what
he
I
agreed with.
said. I didn't say that.
Heavy, did he say that?
You did.
No. I didn't. I said no. What I said that gases are the base to physical existence because the hydrogen atom is the first form of physical life.
No,
That's what I said.
we had an hour argument about if the mind even existed before the atom. You were saying that the atom is the basis that the mind
Right.
came from.
So I was saying that right because I said spirits are gas forces, which means that that's why I asked. I said, did spirits exist before humans? They said yes, spirit. So if spirits existed before humans and spirits are gas forces, then that means that if your spirit is your mindset and your spirit is a gas, and that means yes, your mind is a gas. It's a conscious gas force.
We didn't say that spirit was a gas. You said spirit
Right.
was a gas.
That's what I'm saying. Right. I said spirits are conscious gas forces, not just the gas, because it's not just one gas. Spirits are
Well, okay,
composed
so
of
I have a
atoms,
question.
and we
I have a
just
question
said
for
that
you.
atoms interacting with each other creates gases. Right.
But
So I have a question for you
gas
because
is
that
heavier
I
than
think
light.
I think that brings it around again to the question of what conscious gases would be. Because if we're dealing with spirit, whatever, whoever these beings are that you're calling spirits, because when I look into even what we're saying, the science would say that we're gaseous beings also. Those same atoms that yielded the gases that became this reality, if we're relying on that science, we're made of that
Mm-hmm.
also. So
Right.
it wouldn't be a separation. It would just be an altered state. Meaning, if we're looking at
Right.
a
That I
bottom,
said the same thing. But I said that. I said everything. I said everything is all one. Everything is the all. Every individual part of the all represents the all in itself. So everything is everything. But what I said, that's why I said, but when you
But
talking about individuality, what produces individuality if we all the same? It's the mind, which is the spirit, because the spirit is the personality. It's your mindset. A person, the way a person thinks is how he will be, right? So that means your behavior is predicated on the way that you personally think, not the way you think from the collective, because we not all thinking on a collective basis. We
so
are
then that's where
personally,
you get into you go back to your gene expression, is what I was explaining earlier. Because even when you was talking, you said choose, like how you choose to respond to certain thing, like the broken leg, or how you decide. All of those decision making, processing, the ability to choose, the personality, all that's in the brain. That's why I brought up the fact that if you sustain an injury to certain parts of your body, your brain, you will change. The same thing that you're saying is personality, it is subject to change. So then this goes into another two main things: gene expression. What happens when your DNA already is involved in the regulation of your genes? What happens when your DNA has to express another way because that regulation takes place in these same cells, the neurons, that they have to take on different pathways because an injury has occurred, or because somebody injured you traumatically by saying something to you, say you full of shit, and you actually believe them. Now your being is starting to literally transform because your breathing was affected in that moment, your blood flow was affected in that moment, and all of that the brain registered, and you started to become another person. How you think people become depressed after a relationship? And it
because they ain't
changes their
breathing right.
being. You understand?
They
You
break.
ever seen somebody get out of a relationship? They literally lost weight. They were
Mm-hmm.
sick. You understand? How
Yeah.
is that possible? Well, this goes deeper than just what you're calling spirit. If we're dealing with something like the frontal lobe, let's just keep it simply right there. The boss of they call it the powerhouse or the boss of the brain. It helps you
Mm-hmm.
to decide whether or not you're going to be this way or that way. If you suffer an injury there, everything you're saying that the mind is made of is altered in that moment. And even through the healing process, the brain with its is being so fragile, is not able to recover all of those cells, all of those nerves. So that which made you what you think you are, that held that piece together, is dispersed, and you're no longer that being. So then you have to ask, here goes the main question: what is the force, if there is one, that holds these spirit gaseous beings together? What is the force that holds these neurons and nerve cells to their jobs and to their tasks until something happens that causes it to be that they can't even take those tasks anymore? What is the
so
force that's holding the body itself together?
Reasoning.
so
And
Reason.
if you
one more thing. Because when you say spirit, if you're using chemical elements to describe that, it's still a physical being.
exactly so if you're
And that
acknowledging
the whole time.
but look, if you're acknowledging that there's a force that conducts and composes the gases, then that proves there's a conscious, intelligent force
Mm-hmm.
prior to the existence of gas. And I
That's
would
been
even go, and I would even go this far because Faze, he had the vocabulary to say what I would articulate what I was trying to say the whole time. He said an altered state, meaning that prior to, because if you study physics, if I'm not mistaken, even this Milky Way galaxy was once a ball of gas, right? So prior
Mm-hmm.
to the state of gas being gaseous, you have a state of, I don't like to use the word pure, but like pure energy, right? So that's light. But then you have something when you get into religion and spirituality that's supposed to be a source of even that. When it's saying, let there be light, right? This is the pure consciousness, right?
Okay, so wouldn't we agree that spirit beings can't slap you?
No,
What do you mean by spirit beings?
Like,
that's what
can
I
spirit
was
slap
asking.
you?
So
It
no,
sounds like you
no,
trying to say
it's
ghosts and you just
No,
scared to say it.
I'm
so
saying
Slap my
both.
spirit.
You can get rid of both curse words. Those are spell words. Ghost, spirit, these are spell words. If I ask you to describe what a spirit is and you go to gas, that's within the physicality realm. You don't have to use spirit anymore. Just use what you're trying to say. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to say that these are gaseous beings, when you put a pot on the stove and you put some water in it and you turn the heat up and the heat transfer causes for that vapor to rise, that's gaseous. But what would contain that gaseous compound of beings or whatever you want to call it?
the
What
water.
would contain that to make it be that water vapor that's rising up can be able to order itself in such a way that it can move around in your kitchen volitionally, meaning by its own will or consciously? What would be
But
that?
when you say, but when you say something like, "Can a spirit being slap you?" and I'm supposed to assume it has an arm and it gets mad, then you're talking about a ghost.
Well, you again, there goes a spell word right there, spirit being. And I would say there's no such thing because you would have to define what a spirit is.
Exactly.
And if you're going to say spirit is gas, then we're spirit beings because we're made of those same gases. We may operate in different states. Let's look at a lion, a tiger, a bear. Oh my, look at all these different forms of beings. They exist in those same gaseous states, just altered states of that
Yeah,
gas or
that's
those
why I said
gases.
liquid, solid, gas. Yeah,
So,
it's in a
But we
different
could
state.
so what
even
is a
Exactly.
go
spirit?
into
Which, right? Okay,
disease.
so that would be wait, but look, but see what Faze just said. That just that. Okay, so that's proving my point that gas is the base to to the physical existence. And I said this earlier.
Oh,
Heavy did I?
you
So okay,
you
so
have
if
subatomic particles, bro. You have a
There
light
you go.
base,
Because I was
I would
waiting on
say.
somebody to say that.
You have
The more
quarks.
quantum
Yeah.
you
Went
go
the,
subatomic,
yeah, I
you go quasi.
know.
They
we
just
went
keep
before
going. I get what you're
subatomic.
saying.
We went all these
No,
spaces
we
that
did.
existed before
We
gas,
we did.
and
But that's
and,
what I was
and
saying.
but you're still predicating spirit to gas.
No, no.
Yeah, we're trying to bring
I
you to light at least.
right. Because look, what I said spirits are conscious gas forces, right? Meaning like, okay, so it's how people personalized mindset. That's what spirit
I
is.
got it. I got y'all. Watch this.
So spirit
So
is
basically,
able to be changed based off of physicality. You understand that, right? Because personality sits in the brain.
Right,
Go
which
I'm
study
gonna
it.
means
I'm
reverse it.
not
that
saying you
okay,
don't
okay,
study it,
right, okay,
but I
exactly.
am
Because guess
saying for
what?
people who are, uh-huh.
Because what you okay, if I choose to study a certain field, right? Let's just say I chose to only read Dr. Seuss books my whole entire life. My knowledge will be very limited. So yes, that's why I said yes. That's why I said the spirit and the mind and the brain is not the same thing. The mind is the way you choose to go about things, but your brain is just the base of you obtaining knowledge and growing. But mine is how you personally develop yourself.
Okay, so then here's what I'm explaining to you, and you can take it or you can sit it down. Everything you're talking about deals with DNA and neural development and genetic expression and genetic regulation. And that happens in all of the body, every organ. So we talking about the brain here. Your personality is affected by what food you eat, the relationships you acquire or lose in life,
Hmm.
your ancestors, your mother and your father, what they passed to you, everything. We talked about this before about ancestry.
Yeah.
All of that you're saying is a spirit. It's not that you're saying it wrong. I'm just saying you realize you're talking about DNA and neural
Yeah,
development. That's
yeah, because your nervous system it's a whole network. It's like yeah, I like that's what I'm saying. Like it's not okay. It's not just based on the brain because I understand your heart and lungs got everything in your body is there for a reason. If one of the major organs stop working, your body shuts down. You're not gonna live that long. So it's all a unit. It's all a unit thing. But what I'm saying to them is that it's personal spirit, right? Personal gas forces you choose. Okay, for instance, right? This is the example I gave earlier. If somebody slap you, right? The way I choose to go about how I'm gonna react to that, that's personalized spirit. Meaning that I'm about to if I turn up on you, that's me allowing a new spirit to enter me. Meaning that I'm taking on a new mindset. because now I'm not thinking the same. My thought process, it ain't cause the brain, it ain't, they didn't affect my brain when they slapped me. So what are they actually hurting?
So they did affect your brain. What happens is there are chemical responses, adrenaline, all kind of different things that happen right there from your central point of consciousness, your
Right.
brain.
But I'm saying, but
Uh-huh.
how I choose to see, this is the thing. I
You can't
can go
can you
against
explain to me how you
I
could
can
choose
go,
without the brain?
no, this is what I'm saying. I can go against that chemical reaction though.
Yeah, you can. And you want to know what
Okay, so
causes that?
how? Okay, so ask me
Uh-huh.
this. Answer this.
Uh-huh.
How? What chooses you to go against the chemical reactions?
Yeah, it's the frontal lobe. We only dealing with one lobe. You got the parietal, you know what I mean? You got all these different lobes. We only
Believe
Okay,
in
dealing with
now
the
yourself.
frontal.
That's saying I.
15 seconds. If you're not following, follow. We're about to bring it right back up.
Copy that.
Things. I think he's done a good job of number one, expressing himself. Number two, um, standing on his square when it pertains to these things. But the thing about having these types of conversations is you really got to give leeway.
But
Gas.
sometimes
Don't get it
standing on your
fucked up.
square,
You ain't here
standing
to
on your
speak
square
for
is
himself
cool.
right now.
I'm
But I
saying,
think
but
he's still
but
pushing
like,
gas.
yeah, but can you articulate it in a way to where somebody else can, even if they have a pushback,
I mean,
it's done.
down to pull his sword out and try at least what he
Yeah,
was.
yeah. A nigga stick they check they chest out all day long, but it can still get caved the fuck in. You see what I'm
Oh,
saying? So it's like,
I don't
you
think it's
know,
like, come on,
no,
you tripping, man.
no, I'm not saying that's what I'm saying. Like, just because you stand your ground, that's cool. You can have heart, but do you have understanding and knowledge with that heart? You know what I'm saying? Or do you? Or you could be a hearted
He
fool.
has a different understanding.
Oh my! What is live throwing everybody off? Like, what's going on? Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. There we go. But nah. But here's the thing. I like these. I ain't gonna hold you. These are the conversations that I relish in. You know what I'm saying? These are the conversations that I love because it's two things that we benefit from this. We benefit from it by hearing that our brothers have actually studied to some degree.
Yes.
And they have a yearning and an interest for things that are not just superficial. You know, and it also gives us a chance to bond. It gives brothers a chance to be seen in a different light.
Real
So
quick,
many
Heavy,
other
let me
times
ask
we,
Mwanda this.
yeah.
Mwanda, we've done a lot of lives together. Would you at least agree that he's one of the studied? Whether you agree with what he's saying, he's for sure has put some thought into what he's saying.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean that's my dog. I fuck with him. We from the same city. We from Chicago. We live in the same city. We Chicago. So I know what I know what it takes to be a man of knowledge and education and substance in this type of city that we come from because it's rare. So anybody that I see rocking like that, like I'm rocking with them off the bat just because of that. Regardless if I disagree with him or not. Him and his boy Admiral, they're a little wild, but you know what I'm saying? I fuck with him definitely at least, you know?
Let me ask y'all this though: does science confirm the existence of spirit?
It explains it.
What what science would you say explains spirit?
All of the sciences that pertain to life, which will be all of the sciences. I don't think it will be, I don't think it'll be one science. You got to deal with biology. You have to deal with chemistry. You have to deal with physics.
Absolutely.
And then and just like the brother was speaking on, are you saying this spirit has an arm and a hand? You have to deal with anatomy. If you abandon any of these types of sciences and try to explain it, you will understand that your rhetoric will eventually become faulty. It's
Right.
just like that. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, we
And the
we
number
we
one,
show we
that,
show with the etymology of spirit, right? It starts off with
that's what I
life,
say.
right?
If you
You know what I'm
only
saying?
understand spirit based off of the etymology of the word, then you have not grasped the concepts that are being taught.
But
And the number one science that explains spirit is philosophy.
but let me say this
Pe-
though.
But
People don't see
the
philosophy as a
etymology,
science,
But let me
hold
say
on,
but
but
this
the
but but
though.
etymology, The
Philosophy
etymology,
explains.
I get you, but the etymology deals with the philosophy. That's why you have to read it. It says the life or the emanating forces behind animals and
But
plants. That philosophy deals exactly with that.
Let
It
me
talks about that
hop in.
animated life force,
I'm not gonna go
or
nowhere
that
weird.
that,
so
that animated vital force.
go
Let
ahead.
me
You
say
got it.
this though. Let me say this, Heavy, because I know you one of the first people I've met that really be like on that. Like, no, I ain't trying to hear the etymology of spirit. Not that you're against etymology. Uh,
Right.
and I do get what you're saying, but this what I would say is that I know I was one of the people who've been pushing that for a while, the etymology of it, because I'm talking about how it's colloquially used. I'm not saying
Right.
that's the definitive basis of existence, breath. I'm saying that when people colloquially use the term spirit and they say in the spirit of, or come do this spiritual practice, or they're doing these chants and they're lighting incense, most of these things have to do with breathing patterns and how you breathe and how you can control whether or not you're angry or in a happy mood or not through actual awareness or consciousness of your breathing, and also having techniques of breathing as opposed to just I'm aware I'm breathing, breathe fast, breathe slow, but actually having manipulation of it. Now, with that being said, that is just an art in itself of breathing. That's all that is. That's not the basis of existence. That's not
So,
the different
but watch this.
energies,
Watch this. If you limit spirituality to just breathing, let me ask you
how
this, and
it's
I'm gonna say this again.
locally used in Western society.
Right. Right. But I would say this: is the way you treat your brother a spiritual thing?
Yes.
I rest my case.
And it's not have to do with breathing.
I rest my case.
But what
I want to
happens
ask, where do
in,
people get that from anyway? Like when people saying the
Yeah.
etymology of spirit is breath,
or the Latin
what's
word,
the
We just
pathway that they
read
take
that. We just
to
we
get to
just
that?
read it. We just read it, and that's why this is what people have to be able to read. Because if you go into the beginning of it, it deals with life, any animated and vital force that deals with animals and humans, and then it eventually gets into this idea of breathing, because breathing is associated with life, right? So
yes.
people, it's a misunderstanding when they just. That's why I was just trying to tell you theory. We can't just be saying breath. You have to make sure you encompass the idea of life when you're talking about spirit, and then understanding that breath is associated with life, which is why it deals with exhalation, right? So then when we start to get into other aspects of spirit, it does deal with reverence, it does deal with moral obligation. These are things that it all encompasses. And then we can, if you want to make it a common denominator, we could just say life, right? In all aspects, variations, and facets. You know what I'm saying? So this is where, I challenge people to be more holistic and complete in their of things, so that way we don't sound like we just trying to simplify every single thing, or no, let's
Yeah,
make
what I'm
sure we
asking is when say that, like when they say the etymology of spirit, what's the
Where
right,
the English
old French,
derived it from, they claim to derive it from the Latin.
old French, Latin, shit like
Well,
that. So
in
this
my
is where
native tongue, the word is shaloop. Now, it don't have that meaning.
No, see, no, I'm so glad you said that. So that's what I mean. Spirit, the actual the spirit has a meaning that may not mean the same thing as ruach, which is that terminology in Hebrew. You know what I'm saying? And from my understanding, the different terms have different vibrations that go with them. They have different meanings. The culture of the people it came from.
right. So to your question phase, yes, in both of your points, most people that speak in the English language, we're not, we can use comparative analysis of African languages and or indigenous languages to be able to add to the etymological origins of these particular words, and not just from a Eurocentric, lexicon or linguistic family or language groups. Then we could be able to have a much more, dynamic
But
and
spirit
complex
isn't the other
conversation.
word. So I'm with you on that one. You have to base spirit
Right.
off of the European word that
Exactly.
spirit comes from. You can't just say,
Exactly.
oh, it mean this or that because it mean this
Exactly.
to me.
Now, what we can do is we can go and find the word equivalent in another language, but then, and to Heavy's point, it may have a whole different meaning. You know what I'm saying? It may have a whole different,
well, that's what happened. That's what happened when they decided that they were going to translate these words. A lot of
exactly,
times the word lost
exactly,
its root
exactly.
meanings,
Yeah,
which is why
translations and
etymology was
transliteration.
so
Yeah,
important coming up. We had to look into the etymology of certain words. That's why I said which one. I heard somebody say ruach. Why would that be used though? What would be the purpose of using ruach interchangeably with spirit, and how would it pertain to breath?
The way I came across ruach is it was introduced to me as a Hebrew term that was used in place of spirit. I didn't go anywhere in research and confirm that. Ruach was given to me in that way, and I was heard it was related to the other term in Arabic was a rasul, and
It's ruh.
yeah, and that's how that was introduced to me. So that why would that matter? Why would Hebrew of all language? Because that was the Bible, right? So that's how that was introduced to from.
Facts. Do you think that the Bible does a substantial job of explaining what spirit is?
Not that
No.
does a substantial job. I mean, I know in my studies, which is limited to my experience, the best things I've come across dealing with spirituality and to understand it, to even have an intellectual conversation, were things that dealt with breathing, such as yoga or not Hindu mythologies, but like different tactics and practices they had amongst the Buddhist Far East, practices
So
usually
so
Lao
so
Tzu.
so morality play no part in you understanding.
I'm glad you said that. So I wanted to
That's a
answer
part
you
of
to
the
that.
etymology. That's
No,
what I'm trying to tell y'all. That's
no.
also a part of the
Heavy's
etymology.
right though. I want to answer that. He's right. This is how that was taught to me, as far as breathing and morality and being there for your brother and being there for your mother and giving up your last and taking your jacket off even though it's cold outside and giving it to the homeless person. I was taught that that does go to your breathing, because it goes to how you talk all day. When you be sitting around talking shit, it make you a funky piece of shit type of nigga, and you don't do that type of stuff. You breathe wrong. You're breathing that bullshit, that haterade.
That's
But when you breathe that,
my thing.
like
Oh,
you
my
ever,
bad. Go
you
ahead.
ever when you first start getting positive, you feel a little fake. Like you breathing, you changing your breathing. Hey, how you doing this morning? And your girl like, why you talking like that? Like she want to breathe different. You know what I mean? So if you take it literal into how you actually speak, how you form your breaths to affect the vibration and the frequencies around you, then yeah.
Here's my thing again. When we're going into the etymology of the word, the beautiful thing about it is that even if we keeping it in the European language families and following it from Latin and Old French or whatever the word has its derivatives from, we would still be able to get the idea of what was the intent and meaning behind the word as it developed over the years, right? And we can take all of these things and put them in a definition format, if you will. So it does deal with life. It deals with the animated aspects of life, or vital forces of animating, if you will. It also deals with breathing or exhalation. It also deals with reverence. It also deals with a moral obligation and all of these different other components that's associated with spirit, right? That's also associated with spiritual, and then we can take it to the space of spirituality, right? So all of these different things. So I just have a problem to your point, Heavy, and when people start to just make it very simple when we having these conversations. Oh, spirit just mean breath. You know what I'm saying? And then what you do that you miss so much, you leave so much, substance. You know what I'm saying? There that other people can use to be able to get a much more complete understanding of
I,
the word if we look at it from an etymological aspect. You know what I mean?
I like the fact you said intent. I don't know. I wasn't there to read their mind, but I don't think the people who confined it to the word breath had an intent of oversimplifying it. I would say, like what Phase One asked me, the art and discipline I've come across so far that tied all these things to one, like he said, you would have to know about a little bit of physics, a little bit of anatomy, a little bit, and that to me, all those concepts, even like Heavy was saying, the concepts of morality and discipline and self-reflection, all of those different disciplines and sciences come together in those different breathing arts, if you ask me. Yoga, meditation. It seems like you deal with all those sciences. The anatomy, your morality, your memories, your discipline. It all, that's an art right there where all you're dealing with all that at one time. And it has a lot to do with breathing. So if someone was to tie this into a one word entity, it would make sense to me that that's the direction they would go.
Yeah, Man,
Because I
again,
can't
you
kill you
know,
by stopping your breathing.
like for
Just
me,
that simple.
I enjoy me personally. Like we could kick the bobo, we could talk from a connotative standpoint on certain things. You know, whatever the case may be, we can share different perspectives on certain things. But there's also a time for us to actually get into the academic aspect of it, you know, the literature, the science, the true sciences behind it, based off of accredited, you know, scholars and accredited universities and peer-reviewed studies and all of these things from the greatest minds of the world. You know, this is how we are able to know that we are not just sitting here just talking. Now, I'm not saying us here particularly, but a lot of times when people start getting into this conversation of what is spirit or what is this, you start kicking a whole bunch of new shit that nobody has ever heard of. Now, I'm all down for innovative thinking. I'm all down for innovative forms of thought and different things you could do to make things make sense to you, and then you could share that with others, and that's cool. We can have that. But when you start talking like what you're saying is universal, that anybody who don't share that, you know what I'm saying, is crazy. When you just made up some new shit to make sense for you, that's when I start having a problem. And that's when I feel like my brother Ethereal was doing, you know, with he was making up things that make sense to him and communicating to us as if we crazy for not understanding these new phraseologies and points that he's making, then that is not substantiated and consistent with science. You
Well,
know, so you know,
he may be a little passionate how he expressed himself, but I think he was just keeping it confined to he was challenging us to keep it confined to physicality, to physical existence. He's saying, I don't want to
Okay,
hear nothing about what existed before the smoke or the gases or any of that. Can you just
And then I
stick
would
right
ask,
here?
what existed before that? What existed before the gases? What existed before the atoms, subatomic particles? What existed before that?
and that's my whole point. So Ethereal asked two major questions in the audience.
I
I
like
pinned one.
that
One
question.
was one was um that so the spirit. He says the spirit is a gas body. I want you guys to answer that yes or no. And also, can the brain work without a spirit?
The spirit is a gas body.
That's what that was. That was one of his comments. Yes.
So
Okay.
I don't know that. I don't know what it's made of. And I've challenged people before to just give me uh, what the genetic makeup, at least a template. Give me a template of what the genetic makeup of the etheric body is, or the astral body is. Give me some type of information on what the spirit is actually made of. The body, the being that is inside of our being, operating on a whole different plane. What is that being actually made of? I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that there are different states of observation through which these beings can operate in. And yeah, that's the most I got on that. And as far as can the brain work without a spirit, spirit has still yet to be defined. So all we know, which look at what I'm saying, all we know is based off of the fact that we have a brain. You can't have this same talk with a human being that doesn't have his brain.
That's facts.
So if somebody says spirit is breath. So you mean, so are you saying oxygen? Because no, the brain can't go without oxygen. However, if you breathe in carbon dioxide, you got a problem.
Major
So
problem.
except you're forgetting that breathing is both carbon dioxide and oxygen for a human being, as far as I know. So what is breath? What are you talking about? Okay, I get it though. But which part of this cycle are you saying the brain can't exist without?
The inhalation or the exhalation, right?
That's why spirit is so associated with exhalation, just for the record.
Right? I guess that's because of the expire aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Even still, you can't have that exhalation without what?
Inhalation.
Because what you exhaling.
You're exhaling carbon dioxide, you're inhaling oxygen.
And how does carbon dioxide get formed in the human body?
You got
From
the
oxygen being converted.
okay. All right.
You get what I'm saying? Oxygen has to be breathed in first. I'm not, you're on point. I'm just saying you
Now
can't
with you.
have
I'll follow you.
the
I'll follow you.
exhalation can't happen without the inhalation
Yeah.
first. You know what I mean? And when somebody leaves this realm or transitions, do they take their last breathe in or breathe out?
Breathe
Or breath
out.
in or breath out?
All right.
So I'm gonna ask a very
Excellent.
simple question. I'm gonna
Right?
ask a very simple question. Is will a part of the spirit? Y'all know I break down the anatomy of the spirit all the time. Is will a part of the spirit?
So
I
will,
would definitely say
go ahead.
yeah, but go ahead. You go ahead. Go
Now
ahead,
go
my
ahead.
brother.
Build
I
up.
would
Why?
definitely say is absolutely a part of the spirit because when we start talking about, you know, and I know you don't necessarily like to go into the etymological aspect of it, but there's a part of the etymology of spirit that deals with something that we can easily associate with the spirit. And I'll pull it up really quickly, real fast, without taking too much time. But while pulling up, I would definitely say yes. You know, the spirit has a will. You know, now the question is it a free will or is it or ordained will, preordained will? And I think that's where the conversation begins to get at when we start to talk about will in association with spirit. But I do think that again, in the etymology of the word itself, there's a variation of it that deals specifically um, with that. And I'm gonna put it up. It deals with courage and vigor, right? Courage and vigor are associated with will. You know, so I would say absolutely. This is not just about arguing definition itself, but even though we can use aspects of that to be able to corroborate and say yes, by definition, spirit and will are associated, or if the spirit has a will, so to speak.
I'll go a step further and say that you can't separate any of those entities, if you ask me, because the the the, the problem is the confusion in these conversations, if you ask me, especially to people who are dealing with layman terms, is that okay, I'm hearing you saying these things as different entities, so I'm trying to imagine them different. So now I'm imagining a spirit here, a will here, a person here, a this there, right? And they're all the same if you ask me. Your spirit, the energy you're in, will determine your will. You know what I mean? What you're trying to do, right? What you're desiring, what you're craving, what you're going towards, or what you're even feeling from your solar plexus to do, right? And then you have a wheel that's bigger than you. You have the actual planet spinning. You have the actual sun, moon, and stars moving in rotation and things that are going to go down, whether you're in rotation with them or not, right? They're in the circular motion. They're in the wheel, right? So I would say that it goes back to what Phase One was saying, and I think this is where Americans super lose it. We want to get overly spiritual. It's like what I feel and what I want and what I think. And a lot of that shit got to do with what you eating, what you smoking, what you drinking, what you watching on TV, what you allowing yourself to indulge in, what type of conversations you having. We are way more reactionary than we would like to admit. You feel what I'm saying? So a lot of these entities we're describing are just parts of our overall being. You know what I mean? So I would say your will is part of your spirit, and it could change according to your spirit. You know?
Right. There's an anatomy to spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I say when you just limit spirit to breath, it shows you don't know the components of what spirit is. And this is why the reason why they compared spirit to wind was because it was a force that brought about movement, but you didn't see where it came from and where it was going. So they made a metaphorical comparison with the
But I want to say this
functions
though.
of wind and spirit.
But there is a scientific term for that moment y'all keep saying. So I know in the nation we're taught 7 levels of energy. It's electron, proton, that's the electric, that's the positive and negative. Then you got the neutron that balances, right? Then you got what keeps everything to the earth, gravity. Well, now before I go there, let's go to yeah,
You talking about the
gravity.
fundamental
So then
forces?
you would deal with weak force, which is where you get your waste. Then you got strong force, which keeps the plants and everything. Then you have electromagnetism. So electromagnetism is that moment of death that everybody want to keep acting like we don't understand. Like that moment is understood. That's dealing with light. That's not dealing with gas, from my understanding. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. But you it takes you, how do I explain this? It, regardless of when you think you die, it takes you 500 seconds to actually die at the moment that you finally expire. That's when you lose your electromagnetism. After that 500 seconds, which is 8 minutes and 20 seconds, you will begin to deteriorate. Your Your gaseous element of you will return to the gases. Your matter element of you will sink down into the earth. Your liquid element of you will spill out. You feel what I'm saying? And that's because of they all will follow behind you losing that light element of yourself, that electromagnetism.
That's what, okay, there you go. So remember I was asking about the electromagnetism or what the force would be that will hold these beings together who were spirit beings. I didn't hear nobody say electromagnetism, right? And
I was trying to
again,
break that shit down before you came on. He wasn't trying none of that
Yeah,
shit. Not you, but
we went
Faith.
all. We went all.
I was
Yeah,
trying to,
Yeah,
we
they did
covered
I
a
go
was
lot
trying
there.
of.
to, yeah.
Yeah, but go ahead, Faze. Keep going.
yeah, I mean, it just seems that the more scientific you become, the better off you are with all of these different types of sciences that people are doing their best to articulate. You just become more scientific, and you don't have to just accept because it's quote unquote a scientific statement. You don't have to accept that either. That's where you get all that peer review shit from. You still okay, you take that science, you can develop it's happening every day. Whole new fields of science because you say, I want to take this further. I want to take this another direction. I want to merge these two. And then something else could be created and people start building whole facilities and all kind of stuff around what your ideas were. Spirit has yet to truly be defined scientifically. It's being explained, all of the different aspects when people present it, it's being explained scientifically. Like even what people are calling consciousness. You ever heard people say, and I remember there was a sister named Lisa, I can't remember, Lisa somebody, they had Matrix Unveiled on Clubhouse. A lot of different rooms they used to do, different brothers, I can't remember all of them, they used to be there. But we had a room we did because I wrote a book called Is the Computer God? And in it, I was speaking about what they call consciousness and how it can be replicated. And they were arguing, no, everything that doesn't come from source is unnatural, and you can't replicate the soul, and da 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 da. And I said, what is the soul? Now, up to a certain point of time, you may have thought, yo, there ain't no way we can replicate the soul. Up to a certain point of time, you probably thought that the only way human beings could be birthed if you had a mother and a father. And now
Right.
you
Oh,
should be
same.
able to go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish. My fault. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
It should be understood today that you don't need a mother and a father to birth a human being. You don't need a mother and a father to create a human being. You don't need a mother and father to spawn a life that becomes a human being. They growing babies in literally the dish in the lab every day. You understand? And they're literally doing their best to show that that which people thought was natural, all right, can operate on a different plane because even those beings who you are saying are not natural beings were still formed from natural elements. You understand? So everything still would have to come from source. Even these beings who will be called artificial intelligence or artificial conscious beings or just eventually sentient and conscious beings, they're still a part of source. And so long as you have the formula to form a human being, you can make one. You can make a human being the same way you can make a sandwich.
Now let me ask you this real quick, Faith, before you go. Are you saying that let's say like artificial simulation, you think is that done with with non-organic material or artificial material, or is it still done with biological, you know,
Matter.
like semen, yeah, matters, semen, eggs, etc.
So it would depend. What is the ingredients of semen,
That's
right?
what I'm asking. Are you? That's what I'm asking. Are you
Protein.
saying that the semen that they're using is not organic, or are you saying it's artificially
It would
made in the
have
laboratory?
it would depend. If I'm
Okay.
creating a being to be, let's use what happened at the University of Vermont, for example, when they came out with those xenobots and they were forming these living. You may have heard of it. If you haven't, I will tell you to look into it because they took the stem cells from xeno frogs and were able to take those cells and literally animate them, and not only animate them, they animated them to such a degree that they formed their own type of consciousness and had a will to survive, which means they started to gather different pieces of the environment to reproduce. And even though they weren't necessarily sexually reproducing, they still were reproducing in a way that says these beings will not only survive and give birth to xenobots, those xenobots will become adults and they will be programmed with the same response
How do
to
you spell
stimuli. Say
that? How you spell it? I got my laptop on deck. How you spell that?
Xeno,
E
Xeno
N O. Yeah.
bots.
Bots. Okay, I just want to make sure we
And,
on
It,
point.
and
it,
also and also shameless plug. I did a it's the only live that I got up still on my Ascended Masters news with the Z, Ascended Masters news. Is AI becoming God? Y'all should go check that out on YouTube. Ascended Masters news with a Z. You know what I mean? Go check that out. Is AI becoming God? I did that about 6 months ago, and it was a very interesting topic. But yeah, Xeno, you got it. Xenobots.
yeah, here's the point. That was just a minuscule representation of what happens when you create a being or yield a being scientifically that has the ability to reproduce. So
Now, but
all it needed
but
was,
it was using organic material, so I just want to make sure we on
right,
point with
that's what
that.
I'm explaining.
Right, right.
We on the same page, because what would you say is organic material? You're saying organic as in living material,
Yep. I mean,
or
it's
are you
organic.
saying
It's
organic
natural.
as
Yeah,
in
yeah,
it's natural,
yeah.
as in
Natural.
an element
Yep, yep. Yes,
like
sir.
metals?
The latter.
You understand that metals are
The
natural,
latter.
are natural elements. You know
Yeah,
that. So
yeah,
these are,
yeah,
you
yeah.
still have to. Depends on what type of being you're building. They could form human beings that some way are formed with their basis as silicon as opposed to carbon. They would,
And Wise, you know this based off of the UAP conferences that they were talking about, that there's these beings that have been coming to the planet that are not like carbon based like humans, that they're actually robots that are sentient. So this doesn't require semen. There are levels of consciousness
Hmm.
that the average person just isn't, grasping their minds around. At this point, we're talking about things traveling at 1,000 G.
Oh,
You
so
know what I mean?
you
And being
saying they
able to
sentient,
read.
like they not of
Now this is
They're
interesting.
sentient
heavy
and
physical
Yeah.
sapient.
form as us.
What?
Sentient and
But
sapient.
they were
Yes.
trying to, yeah, but they were trying to say that it's possible, right? That we don't want to just limit our understanding of life as just carbon beings, because there could be something outside of that, into what have you just broke down. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
and then the only hang up with that would be, it'll be dependent on whether or not these beings were able to maintain an environment within themselves that allowed them to interact with human beings' environment, of being a planet that's carbon based. I think a lot of times people think carbon based, they may think it means that mostly carbon. It doesn't mean that. In fact, scientists, they'll say about 1%. The whole planet will be about 1% of the carbon that they're talking about, but that's all it takes to form all these different compounds that wouldn't be carbon in its purest sense at that point, or in its purest state, but it was able to interact with different things. So my point is, the environment that these beings will have to exist in, if it's not suitable for a silicon being, they wouldn't survive. So whoever these beings would be will have to have programmed in them the ability to maintain. I ain't trying to get these niggas no answer, but they would have to. I'm talking about the ones who listening. These beings who be paying attention. They said that's a good ass idea. Let's make an interact. They would need an environment inside. It's kind of like how we have with homeostasis, but even still, homeostasis is, we're programmed to be able to interact with the environment where we're sweating or shivering. Y'all know that. So whatever these beings would be doing, whoever they would be, that's why I say it depends. They still would have to exist in this environment. So it may be that if they're created with that basis, they have something inside that allows them to maintain their existence, surviving internally. What
Now,
I
but
was pointing toward
if you don't
was,
mind, if I could just quickly
go
interject
ahead.
on that. The biggest thing that, because when they, I'm reading into the Xenobots. This is from from one of the institutions, educational website here, the potential of Xenobots, the living machine from Harton, and it's saying something interesting. This is something that I think that is fascinating to the grand scheme of things, because it says that the xenobots are soft body and composed entirely of living cells, granting them unique advantages in navigating complex environments and interacting with biological systems, right? But here's the key to that. They're composed entirely of living cells. So that same intelligence that is used to make you, I, plants, all of these different things are, that we see here, is still used to comprise of this. So that intelligence that is used to create, even though it may be a little bit different form of life, if you will, is still comprised up of that same intelligence. Now, if anything, it shows that intelligence can be modified, engineered, and adjusted to create new forms of life. But I think that I just wanted to just point out that it's still created and utilizing that same intelligence that all life form, as we understand it, is utilized. You know what I'm saying?
But
Exactly.
But I'm
That's why I
saying,
said,
I
hold on
mean,
real quick. That's what I'm saying. I want to make sure to finish that last little point. Organic. I heard you when you like, is it organic? That's why I said it depends on what these beings are being built for, or what they're going to be in reality. Because these xenobots, we want to pay attention to one important key factor. they're able to reproduce. You understand? Reproduction is vital for what? Survival. If you don't have the ability to reproduce in some way, shape, form, or fashion, unless you're an immortal being, you're not able to survive. So if we form these xenobots, that's just a representation. That's why I said a minuscule representation of whoever these beings are, achieving the science of being able to create beings who can maintain their own survival after their creators have. Go ahead.
Are they showing levels of mutation? Can they mutate? Because one of the things what caused humans to even survive this long was the ability for genes to mutate. Is that, do they have that capability, the capability of mutation? Because they could fit the
Like
environment now.
shapeshifting.
Right.
I
Well,
don't
no
remember
mutation.
I don't remember if they expressed mutation. What
Yep,
I do know
yep.
is that
I
it
just
was
found it,
based off
God.
of their environment. What
It does.
the beings that they were created were based off of, and this is my point. That's what we're getting into. It was the same way with us. I just drank some water, right? Some of y'all probably had y'all meals today, whatever it is you're intaking, including the oxygen, is allowing for your being to exist and live. And that's necessary for DNA to be able to do its job to create protein. You understand, out of the mRNA and its expression to create protein that allows for you to function and do all this extra stuff. That can't happen without you being able to take in whatever resources are necessary for you to be able to survive. So that same mutation, it may not be looked at on the great scale of how human beings do it at first, but just the ability to take on pieces of the environment around them and form new living beings out of that, which have a signature, which those beings now say, okay, this is how we're going to survive. That's a mutation within itself because those beings were not that way in the beginning. Same way if I put some lab rats in an environment and start feeding them different types of foods that deliver a shock to their being, okay, genetically, they're going to have children after a while, especially after a long time with enduring with that type of food. They start developing whatever cells or genes they need so that those shocks are not affecting them as much, okay? And then those children are born with those genes to the point where they won't have to develop new genes. They'll already have those genes. If I pick these rats up and put them in a new environment, I can go into their information and study their history just based off of looking at their cells and say at one point in time, they must have been in cage eating these types of foods that shocked them, because right here in their information, it says that they have this gene that can resist the shock. You understand my point? It's based off of the environment. And when your environment shift, you mutate. When your thoughts shift, you mutate.
Now,
Mutation, we watch all these movies like X-Men and stuff like that. They kind of make it seem like science fiction, but mutation is taking place right now while we're speaking, right?
now,
Mutation takes place. Go
I
ahead.
just want to add because he had a question. You just right there because it absolutely does mutate. I think this is quite interesting, right? It talks about an evolutionary algorithm because remember this is a robotic that's mixed with a living organism, living cells. So it says an evolutionary algorithm starts with a population of randomly assembled designs, right? And it says that it deletes the worst ones and replaces them with randomly mutated copies of the better ones. It is the survival of the fittest inside the computer. The
Oh,
fittest designs the virtual reality and then selected to build out the real biological tissue. So it is computerizing a mutation to be able to do just like what you were talking about, Heavy. But again, it's utilizing the building blocks of living cells. So I think it's kind of like a cheat code in this sense.
so so does this confirm or does this have nothing to do with the older concepts of entities that were sentient or less physical that reproduced, right?
It's showing that
Now I don't know
it's
how much
possible.
it goes into it.
It's showing
In
that it's possible, right? Because for one, it was more science fiction. It was theoretical science, but now we have actual applied science is being used. We have results now from what the brother just shared with us today with the xenobots, was something that I had heard of prior, but not and did much research on it to this and just in this depth alone. So
this is
what
why I
I'm
say
saying is,
that,
okay,
because
go ahead.
when I hear about angels and things of that nature in the mainstream religion, they're usually, just like, just these things that fly around. They're kind of like robotic, don't have any life. And when I got into, I remember in Islam, they talk about jinn, right? They don't call them angels. They're saying that they reproduce, they eat, and they're before humans, not after, before, and and they have the ability to be sentient and all that. So when you describe these things, and I say, if you were to say that from a mythological standpoint or anybody's culture, someone may be like, "Oh, get out of here, that's pseudo," right? But when it's presented in the science form, which is good because all that means you have to explain it now. But that's why I said, does this confirm those teachings about sentient beings and beings that can actually reproduce and eat, which to me seems a little fishy
I
if
mean,
you're
yeah,
if
I
you're
would
not
say so
physical.
because a computer isn't sentient in that sense, right? But if you can use a computer that can be able to create, an emergence with biologics, right, with cells to create different life forms, like that's crazy work. You know what I'm saying? That's something that's actually extremely next level. You know what I mean? Because the amount of implications and possibilities scientifically and the impact it can have on civilization and just our understanding of life itself. You're talking about computers actually being able to make themselves real. You know what I'm saying? Like in the sense of
Computers can calculate themselves into sentience.
bro, that's wild. That's you talking about self-creation almost to a certain extent, even though we understand the pre-programming and things that have to be put into making it happen. But it almost gives off that space, to a certain degree. That's crazy work
That's
right
what.
there, yo.
So then you have to think about it. Y'all seen the movie Transcendence?
Yeah, hell yeah, that's my shit.
I was gonna say, if you haven't seen that, anybody who's listening, you go watch that because it's a pure example of the underestimation that takes
With
place when
Johnny
it comes to these
Depp, right?
artificial intelligence beings.
Johnny
Huh?
Depp.
Yeah, Johnny Depp.
Yeah, that's my
Right?
shit.
Now, of course, they had to have the human element, which all of that is happening anyway. When you have the
Mm-hmm.
biometrics, the data that's being collected every time you sign it up for something, they already figuring out human beings. They've been figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
Nah,
Sentient.
y'all not talking about the movie with Tom Cruise?
I don't think that's
Nah.
Tom. No, this is Johnny Depp,
Johnny
the
Depp.
dude who
Oh,
died and had himself downloaded into the
You talking
computer.
about
oh, I
Oblivion,
saw that
heavy.
one.
You talking about
Not
Oblivion.
So are
Oblivion.
you
Yeah, Oblivion tells the story better than
Oblivion
me.
is
so are
Yeah,
you
crazy, yeah.
yeah.
suggesting that artificial intelligence is really not artificial? Intelligence is intelligence. And if it keeps
Exactly.
developing, it can
There you go.
eventually turn itself into life.
There you go. There you go. It's the same thing that happened to y'all, to us. Same
Okay.
thing that happened to
Yeah,
human
So,
beings.
oh, wait, hold on.
yeah.
I'm really with you now.
Yeah,
So, are you
that's
saying
crazy work.
that's what
Yeah,
we
I hear you
already
though.
are?
We
Exactly.
organic
We
material.
forgot our
Any
own program.
story you want to go to, all they had to know is how to form the basis of your programming, right? If we go to Better Sheath or the Bible Genesis, you go and look at the etymology. It's going to take you right to genetics. It's going to take you right to genos, right, which is your gene or the race or the kind. Even when you're dealing with the anesthesia that took place with Adam and Eve, according to the story. I'm not telling y'all to believe nothing. I'm just telling you according to these stories that they wrote. If we're looking at these stories scientifically, they have to make sense because that would mean that whoever these beings were, they weren't all knowing. They were scientists conducting experiments within a garden, which was a controlled environment. Makes sense.
Mm.
So when they put Adam under, because that's what happened, they say they made him go into a deep sleep. You have to make people explain how. That's anesthesia. You know what I mean? That's when you you putting somebody under. And then they say, oh, we took Eve out of the rib. So what you're really trying to say is you had to go into the rib, which contains that DNA, which contains those chromosomes, right? Where you have that 23-23 split that allows for the 46 chromosomes, which is who you are, to be there. They're just explaining science. But what people need to pay attention to is first they had Adam. Then they had animals. And they said that Adam wasn't able to reproduce with the animals. They tested it out. They said they found that it was no helpmeet for Adam with the animals. So then
Correct.
they had to replicate that being using the genes that already existed. What would that be? It's just saying information. DNA is just blueprint. It's just an information piece. You want to know what information is for artificial intelligence? It begins with two numbers. What are they? 0 and 1. Simple. That's DNA for extraterrestrial or artificial intelligence beings. 0 and
So
1
I hate to cut you
is the
off,
DNA.
but
And then you replicate that, and you're looking at one DNA strand, and you like, look at this chromosome. The chromosome will be all these strands wrapped around this histone. And you say, okay, that's basically your zeros and
Mm-hmm.
ones, and one of those chromosomes wrapped up. That's a part of your
And
programming. And you got
so
Then what
another.
Faith,
and what that would do,
Go
hold
what
ahead.
on.
that would do, it'd make it easier to cut on different, genetic codes and things like that. There's something that is quite difficult. But if you have a computerized system that could be able to go through to be able to intentionally activate certain aspects of the DNA that that you have to do, it was very difficult to do I guess you could say in the physical aspect of things. That's truly evolving what living organisms is, and how they could be able to sustain and create a survival of the fittest, even that much more. It's quite profound. It's also kind of scary from a humanistic standpoint, because it's like, we have had these spooky stories that tells a lot about, how this simulation between, biotechnology, if you will, and how they can have a profound impact on us and our relationship with life and this earth. It's quite interesting, but it's good to see that the technology is definitely, and the science is definitely moving, moving in that,
All right.
in an advanced way, if you will.
All right. So look. So Faze,
Yo,
because I like where you just went with this. Because this is what I was saying. So the same way we look, ooh, lazy minded. So the same way we look and say, AI, run the kitchen. AI, run the kitchen. Basically, we start saying AI run the body so much so long ago. Now it just doesn't. We forgot.
Well,
well,
there's
We
still a
completely,
level.
yeah.
There's
go
still
ahead.
a
Yeah.
level of
We're just
programming.
look at we're disconnected from the body. We don't even listen to it no more. This motherfucker got AI and it's telling us, hey, stop eating that. We like, man, my stomach hurts. I don't know what's going on. We completely
But
disconnected from our own intelligence that was
okay,
already pre-programmed in this long ago.
I
But I
like how you
think the
put that.
part, yeah, but we have to remember the role of humans enters. We mentioned a couple of Hollywood spaces. If y'all ever seen the show Westworld, the newer one, you know how it talked about how these digital software, AI systems observe the mannerisms, behavior, record them, store that information to be able to, I guess you could say recreate it, in a much more advanced state. It's no different than, self-driving cars, taking hundreds of thousands of trips to be able to observe the mannerisms and conducts of driving from humans. So there's still a human aspect to this process that I think that, is what makes it different, because when we're looking at it as an advanced technology or something like that from an advanced culture that's outside of humanity, these things have to been developed independently. And in the current state, it's not being developed independently. It's being developed again by ways of human interaction.
No,
So I
Same
think that's
thing. Same as it's the
I'm
same thing as
saying,
you. What you're really saying is conscious interaction. Look at it.
yeah, that I agree
How
with
did
that.
human beings go from 48 chromosomes to 46? What was the head-to-head fusion that allows for y'all to exist how you exist now? How did y'all
exactly.
telomeres even get altered to the event? These were things that scientists are saying could not have occurred naturally in a time in which it would have had to have occurred.
Then that means
So,
that the timing is wrong.
or it could be the timing is wrong, or they're right that some beings intervene to cause
Exactly.
you to be.
There's manipulation.
I mean, yeah, the evidence of that is, I think, is through Rh negative blood. That's
Hmm.
one of the biggest things that that right there alone. And I think two things could be true in this sense. It could definitely be an introduction to a foreign genome into the human genes. On top of the fact that it was done over a long, the modification and assimilation of this gene into the larger population took a long period of time to evolve into its current state that it is now, to where we can still be able to relatively, reproduce with one another, even though, this factor is still within our coding, so to speak, but um I would lean on the dating being wrong, and also an introduction, something introduced into our genome of a foreign, something foreign like that. You know what I mean?
That would have helped you, because without it, you it would have been challenging for human beings to understand about their consciousness. And what it was really occurring in a lot
but
of people.
did that,
Go ahead.
the real question is, did that thing have to be a god?
It could
That's
have been a mutation.
right, because so many people, they accredit that to it being like a god or an angel or an evil scientist or you,
That's
you know what I'm saying?
back to semantics. Is a guy who whatever you work. Some people understand is just, oh, that's the guy. Whatever they worship,
But we only
whatever they
How can they
creator is.
worship it if they don't know what it is that caused it?
So
Nigga, that's
then
You see
most
what I'm
we
saying?
dealing.
Americans. They're
Watch this.
worshiping
We
some
dealing
shit
with
they do not
special.
know what it is.
We dealing
Most
with special syndrome
Americans, why
because
pimping
what if
so
they
cracky
took
in
you?
America? Because you could walk in and make them worship damn near. They easily read the wrong direction, hard to lead in the right.
Whoever these guys would have been that had hands in it, they would have had to been scientists. And that don't make you a god; it make you a scientist, and you
facts.
can go wrong.
Facts.
But I was about to say we dealing with special syndrome then, because isn't it still a possibility that human beings were actually created to do somebody else's work like AI? You understand
Mm.
that the only reason why they created you was where they get the slave race theory
So
from? Go ahead.
I
so
think we gotta
so
Oh,
stop
Faith, are
separating
you
ourselves. It's
are
it's
you
us. It's earlier versions of
Faith,
us.
are you leaning towards the Anunnaki kind of concept of
Yeah,
this when you say
I
that?
think I would have to be because I don't know any other basis where we could pull that from.
but
I would say we would lead, yeah, we could lead to or lean to the Anunnaki of, these beings created these beings to help them mine for gold and
Okay.
basically help them build up societies that
all
they
right, but
want
let me
built
push
up.
back on that though. Let me push back on that real, if I could, right? If we talking just about genetics and blood for a second, right? So we talked a little bit about Rh negative. From your knowledge, phase before 1492, where was the world's population concentrated Rh negative blood found? Before 1492,
I
Europe,
don't know.
Europe,
only Europe, damn near.
only Europe, absolutely only Europe, right?
So why do it? Go ahead. No, continue.
So
Go ahead, continue. My fault. I didn't mean
So,
to cut you.
so no, I'm gonna be short-winded. So after that, we do the American. And the reason why that's important is because though I understand exactly, like I share similar, things where I could go with that. But the reason why I have to be intentional with this is because when I think about the development of Homo sapiens, right, and then we look at these things like Rh negative factors, and we see that Homo sapiens, as we understand it as modern humans, don't have this natural in relationship and involvement with this Rh negative aspect, though we see it amongst a specific, what they call a subhumanoid species that we now are trying to consider to be an advanced species, which is crazy, but we know the purpose of that. But the point is that we see that this Neanderthal was the one that really was the perpetuators of this factor, this Rh negative factor, especially the population that carry a Neanderthal gene with them. So though I do agree that it may have been something that came here that directly, impacted, the humanoid species, if you will. I don't think that's something that has something to do directly with, let's say, Black people, indigenous African peoples, or indigenous Americans, or whatever the case. I think it has something solely to do with what we would call European peoples. You know what I'm saying?
So then then there you go, because that would mean that would maybe explain why they've dominated in this reality,
Absolutely.
because they're
Yes.
they're the ones who have the highest positions
Yes.
in the science reality. They're the ones who have the weaponry to conquer lands. And if you have to argue who are the most conscious beings on the planet right now, or who are the most intelligent beings on the planet right now, collectively, and who's leading in that regard, it will be those same Europeans. It will be
Well,
those same
I,
Caucasoids.
I would say I would say that part of their DNA is it that keeps them a level of detached from this realm to have the same level of moral obligation and so on and so forth as a species that we see amongst indigenous peoples that have a different level of relationship with nature here on this realm. So because of their removed devotion, so to speak, to the planet in that regard, that it can be able to create a behavior trait that can have an illusion of power or intelligence or higher intelligence, when really it's just almost like a just a destructive nature. And that's kind of biased. I'm not going to be,
No,
I'm
you're saying
Yeah.
something that makes sense. It would be both then. They have that destructive nature. Also, they have access to all of the sciences
of the
that
yes,
people are
sir. Yes,
trying to
sir.
figure out. So
Yes,
here's what I get. It makes sense. That's a very strong point. So here's what I can see, right? Because again, I don't know. The reason why I said I don't know, I've heard about all of that. Dr. Malachi York was teaching a lot of the RH negative stuff like that. I don't know what happened before 1490. I just got here in 1998.
for sure.
What I can say is that it could have been a situation where there were multiple projects happening at
I agree with
once
that.
with these beings, or because here's what we can say. whoever or whatever these Rh negative beings are, whatever type of haplogroups are here, you still can reproduce with each other. You feel what I'm saying? And that has to, it means something that human beings are able to reproduce. Mongoloids can reproduce with Caucasoids and Negroids alike. So that means y'all have common ancestry to a certain degree.
Absolutely.
And you still
Or,
have, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Finish your point.
No, go
My
ahead. Let's
fault.
bounce around.
No. So what I was going to say is, well, with the Neanderthal, it was one side could produce babies, and the other side the babies couldn't. They couldn't. It wouldn't allow the babies to be born. Right. I would say this though: when we talk about these Anunnaki, I think a lot of people have this story a little backwards. And why? That's why I told you to pull up Belit Elite. Right.
Oh, hold on. Hold on.
Because that goes back to the Atar Hasis and a couple other Sumerian documentations, and they're explaining of this creation. And it wasn't that the Anunnaki did the creating. When you go back to the Sumerian tablets, they don't say that the Anunnaki did this. They give this credit to who was known as the womb goddess, which was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, when they
That's
think of
Ninti.
this,
That's Ninti.
Yeah.
most
But no,
people.
Ninti was made by her.
Oh man, we got 4 seconds, guys. We'll come right back.
Ninti was made